Affidavit that all accounts are prepaid. Senate Document No. 43, 73rd Congress. The ownership of all property is in the state. Individual, so-called ownership is only by the virtue of the government, i.e. law, amounting to mere user and use must be in accordance with law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. Congressional Record, March 9, 1933 on H.R. 1491, p. 3. Under the new law, the money is issued to the banks in return for government obligations, bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptances, and bankers' acceptances. The money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar, because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of the people of the nation. Title 18, Section 8, Obligation or other security of the United States. Defined. The term obligation or other security of the United States includes all bonds, certificates of indebtedness, national bank currency, Federal Reserve notes, Federal Reserve Bank notes, coupons, United States notes, Treasury notes, gold certificates, silver certificates, fractional notes, certificates of deposit, bills, checks, or drafts for money, drawn by or upon authorized officers of the United States, stamps and other representatives of value, of whatever denomination, issued under any act of Congress, and canceled United States stamps. FRNs are obligations of United States, HJR 192. The term obligation means Federal Reserve notes and circulating notes of Federal Reserve banks and national banking associations. Title 31, Section 3123 makes a statutory pledge of the United States government to payment of obligations and interest on the public debt. Title 31, Section 3123. Payment of obligations and interest on the public debt of the faith of the United States government is pledged to pay, in legal tender, principal and interest on the obligations of the government issued under this chapter. B. The Secretary of the Treasury shall pay interest due or accrued on the public debt. As the Secretary considers expedient, the Secretary may pay in advance interest on the public debt by a period of not more than 1 year, with or without a rebate of interest on the coupons. Therefore, the government pledges to pay government obligations which Federal Reserve notes are, and pay them with FRNs, which is legal tender. Taxes and all bills associated with corporations are all government obligations which they must pay when we accept them for value and return them to the government that has an obligation to settle the debt, dollar for dollar. It is a fact. Title 31, Section 3130 further delineates in its definitions a portion of the total public debt, which is held by the public as the net public debt. Section 3130. Annual public debt report. A general rule. On or before June 1 of each calendar year, after 1993, the Secretary of the Treasury shall submit a report to the Committee on Ways and Means of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Finance of the Senate on 1. The Treasury's public debt activities, and 2. The operations of the Federal Financing Bank. For whatever reason we can associate with their actions and reasons they did so, we may benefit. We are beneficiaries, the government are trustees. Trustees pay debts, beneficiaries do not. Thus, government obligations are not taxable. These obligations of United States under Title 31, Section 3124, exemption from taxation. Stocks and obligations of the United States government are exempt from taxation by a state or political subdivision of a state. The exemption applies to each form of taxation that would require the obligation, the interest on the obligation, or both, to be considered in computing a tax, except 1. A non-discriminatory franchise tax or another non-property tax instead of a franchise tax imposed on a corporation, and 2. An estate or inheritance tax. B. The tax status of interest on obligations and dividends, earnings, or other income from evidences of ownership issued by the government or an agency, and the tax treatment of gain and loss from the disposition of those obligations and evidences of ownership is decided under the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 26 U.S.C. 1 et sec. An obligation that the Federal Housing Administration had agreed, under a contract made before March 1, 1941, to issue at a future date, has the tax exemption privileges provided by the authorizing law at the time of the contract. This subsection does not apply to obligations and evidence of ownership issued by the District of Columbia, a territory or possession of the United States, or a department, agency, instrumentality, or political subdivision of the district, territory, or possession. The Constitution does not give we, the people, rights. It forbids the government to ignore the God-given rights of the people, as seen in the Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. In addition, the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. There is no law to discourage the people from creating credit instruments. In fact, by the 14th Amendment, Section 4, we must accept for value the debt instruments/legal tender of the United States. As long as the debt exists, the democracy exists. The Republican form of government, the United States of America, can only come back when the debt is gone. Since Federal Reserve notes FRNs as legal tender are debt notes, an insufficient number exists for their repayment in kind, will not cover the interest owed. Using FRNs to pay debts only increases the government obligations on debt by their creation. As it is a fact that all property in the United States as a result of the March 9, 1933 Act is under the ownership of the United States, and/or its designee, that the currency is underwritten by U.S. Treasury notes, bills and/or obligations, it is impossible for me to be held liable for government obligations. The unconstitutionality of said act is expressed in Congress' own words. A. Since March 9, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declarational emergency. These proclamations give force to 470 provisions of federal law. These hundreds of statutes delegate to the President extraordinary power exercised by Congress, which affect the lives of American citizens in a host of all-encompassing manners. This vast range of powers, taken together, confer enough authority to rule this country without reference to normal constitutional processes. Senate Report 93-49, July 24, 1973. Therefore, and per the above, let the trustee settle the claims for and which I do hereby give my permission. I do declare my willingness to offset public debt by accepting and returning for value my private debts that created new currency into circulation and indebted the government thereby. This full audiobook was created by the Mental Chemist for personal study and education. Please like, share, and subscribe.